Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Carlo with 4GQ TV and MCU After Show with Paris, and today we have a very special guest, Salvatore Abbinanti. Did I say that correctly?
Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect.
So, Sal, I know that your name is very Italian, so I have two questions for you right off the bat. Number one, New York style pizza or Chicago style pizza?
Ooh. That's no, that to me they're completely different. To me, I love New York pizza because I like to fold it and I like to eat it, and it's a different taste. I mean, I'm not sidestepping it. And then there's pan, which to me is completely different. It's like Polish sausage and a hot dog. It's two different things. So I like them both. I mean, when I'm in New York, I wouldn't dream of getting a pan. I would always get a New York style, and which is the fold. You got that fold in the middle, or you get two and fold. Chicago pizza, people like it, people don't like it. It's tough because three pieces, and then you got to start wearing your wife's maternity clothes because your pants don't fit. So I like them both, but if I was on a desert island, I would probably say Chicago.
Okay, that's fair.
There you go. Yeah.
Nice. But
New York is good. I mean, it really is. Now it's like anywhere else. You got Sparrows, you got shit ones, you got notebook paper where it tastes like, like a wet paper bag in New York too. And then you got Patsy's and you got other ones that are good. So, they're really good. And it all comes down to the sauce. If the guy uses a red sauce where it's all about the pig fat. If there's pig fat in the red sauce, right away. And then it's really good pizza. If it's just, ragu, or he's using this lightly, it's shit. But the tourists don't know the difference. What amazes me about New York is that they have the nerve to have Subway. People that live in New York eat Subway. You've got some of the most amazing delis in the country, in the world, in New York City, and there's people going to Subway. I mean, and they sell pizza at Subway. There should be a law against it.
What? I just came back from visiting my family in New York. I didn't even know Subway sold pizza now in New York.
It's sacrilege. It's
sacrilege. It is. Yeah, I agree.
They're selling pizza.
It's like it shouldn't be allowed. I mean, when I see it, I laugh. When you see, there's a lot of tourism in New York that it's just about what's cheapest.
Yeah, it's something here in Florida we lack a great variety of, in this particular area anyway, is the old mom and pop shops. A lot of it is corporate based, like Domino's, Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
All those chains that are like, I don't really want to eat there today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the second question I had for you was pineapples on pizza, yes or no?
No. That's come on now. Stop. Cut it out.
I had to ask.
Stop it. It's like when they gave Iron Man a nose. It doesn't work, man. It doesn't fly. It's kind of like, no, the Centurion armor, no, it just didn't. It didn't cut it. So absolutely. And I lived in LA for a while, and I used to amaze me what they put on pizza, and I would be like, guys, stop it. Yeah.
I do have another question now that we ventured into this territory. Do you have a favorite go-to topping on pizza, whether it's Chicago or New York style?
I stick with the basic, man. I go with sausage because it's become like nobody on planet Earth eats meat anymore. So I like sausage. I like double crust. I like ordering it well done. You could get it well done, which I like, the crispy crust. Lumalnati's here in Chicago has what's called the butter crust, which is really good. If you're ever in, when you're in town and you get Lumalnati's, get the butter crust, but also ask for it well done. But what I'll get sometimes, which I really like, is green olives. And I think the green olives is because of the salt. Again, I like it. I like us, so once in a while I'll get sausage and green olives. Not black olives, but green olives. Yeah. And but stick with sausage, man.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It's kind of like it's the same way with comics. You know, when you get to the age where you start buying comics, when you're young, you just buy everything, and then once you
Right.
reach an age where you start buying it based off of, I like the, some people it's steered by the art, some people it's steered by the writing, but it's the same way with food. You either get it or you don't get it. You know, it's either important to you or it's not, and if it's not, I get it.
So like all the good stuff that that you're doing as far as like art and things like that. So what inspired you to start getting into inking and drawing and stuff like that? So
well, no, that was how I got, I mean, I got into business to be an artist, and I started, my style was just not going to fly. They were not they were not going to hire me. I stood in every portfolio line. I went to every con with my stuff. I went up and met every editor, all that prototype of what you're supposed to do to get in the business in the 90s. I did all that. And I was just not going to, they were not going to hire me. My stuff was just, it was not meant for mainstream comics. It was not the style that they wanted. So it was either I did it myself or it wasn't going to happen. Now that's cool until you get sick of Top Ramen 3 times a day, and you gotta make a living. You gotta eat. So I knew Alex Ross from advertising. We used to work at Leo Burnett together because he was an artist and I was an artist, and we kind of crossed paths. And then I met him, and he was the guy. It wasn't the time. And then he asked me to help him out, and I said no. It's kind of like when they asked, "Do you want to fight Apollo Creed?" Rocky says no. And then you realize, well, what the hell am I doing that I'm too important? I was bartending at the time to kind of eat. And then I just said, okay. So I started working with Alex, and I was able to do my work on the side. And so it's always been the reason I got into business was I grew up with Kirby and John Buscema and Gene Colan and those guys in 70s, the early 70s comics. So, but again, my style just wasn't going to fly. So but the good news is doing indie comics isn't as hard as it used to be. So it's a lot more work because, you want to walk in the front door. I wanted to draw Luke Cage, and it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. So it was always why I got into business.
Yeah. Just thinking about how the industry, you got your sort of defined looks that the major, comic book companies at that time wanted, the colors had to be a certain way and stuff like that. So I'm sure up and coming when you're like, oh, I got this fantastic, probably look really, really, really great. Right. And you're like, oh, check this out. And they're like, it's good.
Well, getting into mainstream comics, I always love when people ask me how to get into comics. I'm like, I'm the last guy to ask because I couldn't get in. And I'm still not in. I mean, I produce my own stuff. I mean, Mercury Comics, that's basically that's this. This is Mercury Comics. I mean, it's just me. And you learn how to do it, and you either you do it yourself, and it's the only part that sucks about it is that a lot of comic stores don't buy independent comics. When you know how it is, there's a lot of brand loyalty with comics. When you go into a comic store, you know what you want. And to take a chance on an indie title, is tough. So, but it's either you want to do it and you do it, or you don't. And if you want to do it bad enough, you're going to do it. And if you're not, I don't really have a choice. I have to do it because drawing is the only thing that shuts the voices up inside my head.
I gotta say, the one thing about indie comics that I love is that you pour your passion into something like that. It's not corporately owned or corporately controlled. You have all the freedom that you want as an artist and thinker to put what you want down on that piece of paper. And hopefully one day something hits and it gets out there more and more. But I've been seeing a huge uptick in a lot of indie comics, especially at conventions. I'm noticing that at conventions, the indie booths are starting to become full.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not it is what it is in the sense of mainstream comics are fine. And I'm not one of those guys who, because, I do indie comics, I've got this thing against mainstream comics, because I love Marvel and DC. My style was just not going to fly with what they wanted. And I tried to do it their way. I tried to do it in the way they wanted it. And as a professional, you got to look at what's they're producing, and either you can do it that way or you can't. And you got to live in the real world. But for anybody who wants to be a writer, who wants to be an independent artist, all I can tell you is we need independent creators more than ever. And the next Neil Gaiman, the next Alan Moore, where is he right now? He's on a podcast probably talking about pizza, or he's bullshitting about Seattle, or he's talking about Tampa. I mean, that's what it's like but at the end of the day, they're not going to come knocking on your door. It's just not going to happen. If you're waiting to be discovered, no offense to editors, most editors I've dealt with who are in portfolio reviews, they couldn't find their ass with a funnel. I mean, they don't know what's good, because everybody says they want what's new, but yet nobody wants what's new until somebody else says, hey, this is good. So nobody's willing to take a chance because they're afraid at what's new until everybody else wants it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, look at Mike Mignola before Hellboy. I mean, he was just hacking it out. And then when Hellboy first came out, he was a big hit with people in the know of comics who liked it, but you couldn't get it at the comic stores because comic stores weren't buying Hellboy, because they thought, what the hell, what are we going to, now we sell more Wolverines, and then when it took off, then everybody's like, oh my God, Hellboy, so Mike Mignola is so great. And it's like, well, he kind of always was, but yet you guys just were afraid to give him a chance to at a different style. Bruce Timm is like that. We're looking at Bruce Timm's style, where it was different than everything else. And then all of a sudden it became like, oh, it's cool. So I think anybody that wants to be a creator, I always tell them, I go, guys, just, sit down and get it done. And that's the hardest part, is you got to just literally, what sucks about being an artist is there's no shortcut, man. You got to just sit down. There's no easy way to do it. You got to it's 99% sweat. And my son wants to be an artist, and I tell him, I go, man, you got to sit on your ass and draw all day, or you don't. And if you don't, you could be an artist, but you're not going to make a living. Anybody who wants to be an artist, I feel sorry for them if they would go to Alex's studio, because Alex is an absolute machine. And when you go over there, that's all he does is draw. He's the Terminator. All he does is paint. While we're here scratching our ass, he's painting. While I'm watching the Bears game on Sunday, he's painting. And that's his singular focus. And as an artist or a musician or a writer or whatever, you have to have that singular focus.
Right. Yeah. His art is just out of this world, right? I like how he just has that classic sort of look and feel to him. So it's just like when you see those covers, they're shiny, they're bright, and it's just you get automatically, that's Alex Ross's work right there.
He's the hardest working guy I know. I mean, you'd think that with the success and with the notoriety he has, he would slow down, or he would say, hey, I'm gonna take it easy and kind of rest on my laurel. The opposite. I mean, he doesn't go to cons. He gets a lot of heat whenever I run his booth and for him at different shows. And sometimes fans get a little frustrated. They're like, hey, how come he's never here? How come he never does shows? And he does shows, but he only does a few a year. But it's because he's like, hey man, if I do San Diego, he's like, I got to be away from my studio for a week. And he said, I don't want that. I don't want to be away from the board for a week. So to him, it's just like, look, my true love for the fan is I put the work out. I'm there delivering work, consistently. So when people go, well, why isn't he here? He doesn't like his fans. He loves his fans, and he loves comics, which is why he's always working. Bill Sienkiewicz is the same way. I mean, Bill is much more cerebral than Alex. Bill, it's too, it's kind of like, it's weird working with the two of them because they're two completely different approaches to artwork. Alex is Coca-Cola, and Bill is like Mr. Pibb, he's like Dr. Pepper, it's just Bill is like Basquiat, you could give him a napkin and a crayon and say, hey, Bill, what do you think? And he'll draw you something that you don't see coming. If you ask him to draw the Joker 10 times, the Joker looks different all 10 times. If you ask Alex to draw the Joker, it's going to look like the Joker, but it's weird. And I've learned so much just by watching, their approach to how they do things.
Yeah. And that's a good way to absorb all that sort of aura and things that they're doing, so you can sort of focus and as you're working on your stuff, right? So that's awesome to see.
It either it should inspire you, there's some artists, when they see somebody that's really good, they get discouraged. They think, oh, it's like, no, it shouldn't discourage you, because art is all relative. Everybody's different. It's like your fingerprints. The way you're going to do it is not the way somebody else would do it. So never feel like the way somebody else is doing it is better than yours. It's just different. And what I've learned from them is more just a work ethic, in terms of how you've got to sit down and you've got to do it, whether you feel like it or not. And sometimes you do it, it's just a job. And then other times it's more like your passion project.
Yeah,
I'm at a disadvantage. I don't know now what angle are you guys coming towards comics from? Fans, writers, editors. What was your passion for the subject matter, so that I kind of get an idea of, I don't really know you guys that well.
Yeah. We're fans. I'm more of a fan. So I'm just a fan of art, a fan of indie, a fan of the mainstream stuff. I'm on a Marvel group and things like that. So it's, for me, it's just from a fan's perspective, and being able to sort of talk with folks like yourself in the industry that are right now that are grinding, and to help get your stories out there, to help sort of spread that word. And we've talked to Ho-Che Anderson, we've talked to a few other folks that are out there in the industry, and they all have incredible stories. And it's just like, how can we help to sort of amplify that message and get that word out, because there's just so much talent and things like that, and a lot of people just don't know, because they just don't know. So and whatever we can do to help do that. And Carlo, how about yourself?
Well, my story is a little bit different. Growing up, I was really into the 80s cartoon era, like maybe the late 70s, early 80s, like the Smurfs, the Transformers, G.I. Joe. And I started looking at all this American artwork, or it looked American to me at the time. And I was like, wow, this is great. Who makes this happen? And then, I obviously, as a kid in curiosity, I found out artists and writers make it happen. And then I started looking into that a little bit more. And as I got older, my dad would start taking me to the comic book store, because my dad, he loved comic books. He loved baseball cards. He loved all collectibles. And he said to me, if you ever have too much money, spend it on comic books, because you never know if they're going to go up or down. He said, they're one of the most unique, valuable pieces of paper that has great market fluctuation. Sometimes it goes really high up, and then sometimes it just drops incredibly low. And at that time, we started buying, Image started coming out, and I became very aware of Todd McFarlane. And I think he was one of my first favorite artists. The Spider-Man webbing, the way that it was just drawn just blew my mind. Like, it was the first change that I've ever really seen at my age. And then I started looking at some of the writers too, and I was like, this story is really good. And I got into a lot of the, I would say, mid 90s Green Lanterns. I love the way they were written. I don't even know who the writer was. I can't even remember to tell you, but I remember that I could not miss a Green Lantern issue, because I loved the stories in them. I thought they were that unique. So for me, am I a fan? Yes, but I also I'm a fan of not just the corporate identity of the comic. I'm a fan of the people that make it happen, the magic behind the art, the magic behind the writing, and all of that.
There's no one, this is, I've always said comics are kind of like Cosa Nostra, they're kind of, it's like our thing, and I don't apologize for it. I've never apologized for it. And it's like, if people don't get it, they don't get it. But I defend it when people make it seem like it's some kind of a social, we're socially jilted or we're stunted or something created, when they use geeks and nerds and all that. I'm like, guys, some of the most creative people in the world work in comics. So I don't want to hear any of that crap. So to me, it's just like growing up, when you said you wanted to draw comics or you wanted to be an artist, your parents just kind of waited for you to grow out of it. And then it just basically came like, no, this is what you want. This is what I wanted to do. And so it was just like, hey, even then my mother would always say, hey, when are you going to get a real job? And I went into advertising to be an artist, and I was miserable because I wanted to draw comics, but I just felt I couldn't make a living at it. And then finally, any job you have is going to be a struggle anyway. So if you're going to struggle at it, you may as well do something that, you feel you want to do. And it's tough, it's not easy. It's tough. And when you want to be an artist, any type of artist, it's one thing to do it. And then it's another thing when you start putting it out there and you got to listen to criticism.
Right.
Because people can be, especially now with the internet, people can be pretty damn cruel, and you just got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. You're going to get criticized. You're going to hear it, and it's okay. Everybody has their opinion.
I speaking of artists, I used to draw a lot. And I always wanted to draw comic book style and cartoon style, like Fred Flintstone. And then I would look at Batman animated series. And I entered a comic contest where I actually drew the Predator. And it was graded by people from Valiant Comics. I don't remember who they were at the time, but I think like Exo Manowar, Turok. And so I drew this Predator design, and I got the idea out of a comic, and I tried to draw it the best I could. And I don't think it looked good at all. But I was like, what the hell? It's art. It's my art. It may not be good, but I'm going to submit it. So I submitted it. And the feedback I got was that it was not good feedback. There was a note on it. There was a note on it that says, I don't know who drew this, but this is the worst thing I have ever seen. This looks like a tree and not the Predator.
Yeah.
And I came in like 100th place or something.
There you go.
And that made me want to draw better. And the next competition came around. I did Batman animated series, and I came in second place, and I got a little signed hat, and I got, a watch, and I felt really good about myself. And then I got into pastels, and then my memory got a little bad. So I started having issues where, like, to have the thought in my head, but I couldn't transcribe it to paper anymore. And it was just like a terrible feeling. So I started writing, and I wrote my own movie script when I was in, I want to say 11th grade. And I ended up signing that off to somebody who said they were a Rockefeller, but probably a distant cousin. And I don't know whatever happened to it after that. I don't know.
Did better than I did. I mean, I knew I needed to get out of portfolio lines when I started to get into fistfights with editors. Yeah. When I started, because when you go to a con, and they don't even really do it that much anymore, they have what's called portfolio review, and they usually pick the editor who, in order to get a trip to the con, you have to agree to do portfolio review. And I always tell guys this, I go, look, if you're going to go up with your samples and you're going to go up with your work and you're looking for a job, talk to people that have the ability to hire you. So if you go up to the booth and you go, hey, are you guys taking is the submissions editor here? Are you looking for artists? And they go, well, my niece is here. She's an artist. She'll look at your book. Then walk away. Away. Because the worst thing at getting advice is getting bad advice. Because most people, they show their work to their family. And what the hell is your family going to say? They're going to say it looks great. Well, that's good when you're 12. But when you want to get into business, you need somebody to say, hey, man, you need to work on this, or, you know, because once you want to be a pro, they're not going to cut you in slack. They're going to just tell it like it is. They're going to tell you, man, this is bad.
Right.
This is terrible, because you're competing now against professionals. You're not competing against other kids. You're competing against guys that have been in the bit. You want to be a cover artist. I tell guys this all the time when they show me their paintings. I go, you're competing against Alex. So you got to be realistic. Well, you got to be realistic. You might want to try indie publishers, smaller publishers, build your way into Marvel and DC, put out your own book. And then, you know, we're usually right where we are for a reason, and then be cool with where you're at. And then you evolve and you move to the next step. But guys that want to come right out of the gate and get, you know, be handed Iron Man or be working on Thor, you're up against some pretty stiff talent, guys that have been in the business for a long time.
Yeah.
So
do you do any writing and stuff like that?
I started. Well, I put out my first indie title, Atomica, I did in 05. I worked with the writer Andrew Dabb, and he was a good guy. He was getting into comics too at the time. Sometimes you think you're a writer, and then you write it and you realize, man, I'm no. And then other times you should just jump in, because many times as a creator, as a self-publisher, the biggest hurdle is working with people, because they bullshit you, especially if they're friends or they're people that you think you know. And it's like the old adage, don't go into business with family or friends, because it's not going to stay that way for a while.
Right.
And then, so I started, when I did The Hostage, I said, you know what, I laid it all out. I knew what the story was about. I knew I kind of I plotted it. And then I was going to work with Andrew on it, and he was busy. And I waited and I waited. And then I just finally said, man, I got to just do it myself. So sometimes it's cool to work with writers. And then other times you just go out on your own. You know what you want. You know, sometimes they give you a script you've waited 6 months for, and it's like 2 fight scenes, and it's ouch, ooh, ah, sound effects for 9 pages. And you go, that's what you wrote? You know, in 6 months you wrote 3 pages of sound effects, and, you know, it's not Alan Moore, you know? So you're like, oh man, shit, I'm going to do it myself next time. Other times it's cool to collaborate. You know, it's nice to have somebody that you're working with that you feel like, hey, you know, we have the same kind of creative sensibilities. But I can't be a high school principal and be calling you all the time and say, hey man, you got, where is it? Because then they make you be that person you don't want to be, which is you got to be a pain in the ass. And I got to call you and say, hey man, where's the pages? And you're like, well, my wife left and my girlfriend's pregnant. You're like, oh man, I don't want to, you know. And you're like, never mind. Never mind.
Man. So
awesome.
Sal, one thing I want to ask you is, I know that you've been into art and comic books, you know, for a pretty long while. Do you have any favorite supervillains? Because I think like supervillains, a lot of people don't think of favorite supervillains, but me is the Juggernaut. Like, I love the Juggernaut.
Yeah.
So
I was the same way. I like the classic Kirby stuff. So I always loved the Destroyer and the Juggernaut. And it's funny you said the Juggernaut, because it's him. I got the statue right here, and it was the Destroyer and it was the Juggernaut, and it was just always kind of based on. I liked a lot of the crazier. I liked Electro. I liked the Rhino. I liked a lot of the really kind of Ditko weird, the Scorpion. I like the Tarantula, you know, the weird Spidey villains. Rocket Racer, remember that guy who went up the side of the wall on a skateboard, you know, Stilt Man, you know, I mean, that kind of thing. Because, and I told my wife when we went to see Thor, the first one, and I was sitting in the theater and the Destroyer showed up. I told her, I said, I can die a happy man. Because as a kid, if you ever told me that they would make a movie with the Destroyer in it, where he shows up, I never would have believed you, because there was no hope that was ever going to happen. So I'm like, whatever they do with these comic movies from here on in, I'm cool, because they made a movie where the Destroyer showed up.
Yeah.
You know, the Juggernaut, you know, was one of those. I like those villains where, like, you can't really beat him. It's like the Hulk. I always told people my mom was like that. My mom was like the Hulk in the sense of you're not going to win an argument. You just got to put her on a rock and throw it into space. You're never going to win. You're never going to win. And the more you beat their ass, the more pissed off they get. So you're like, you defeat the purpose of beating their ass. So they just keep getting stronger. So finally you just go, oh shit. After 3 issues, you're like, you can't beat this guy. Just you got to just throw him into space, wait till he comes back, you know, and like in a year or 2, he'll pop up in another book. You know, I used to love Crusher Creel too, you know, the absorbing man. You know, the way Kirby drew him with that egg head, you know, his head was all crooked, but I loved Crusher Creel. And because he always showed up in Hulk, he showed up in Thor, he showed up like he fought everybody, that guy. And in all those years, he never got a costume. He always had the convict pants on.
Yeah.
You know, he always had the striped pants on. You're like all these, you know, even the Trapster, Paste Pot Pete, even he got a costume. You know, even the Sandman got a costume.
Sandman got a costume.
Yeah.
Right.
Some, remember when Kirby gave Sandman that real cool costume when he fought the FF? You know, when he was in Spider-Man, he just had a shirt on. You know?
Shirt on, right?
Yeah. So for me, I was like, man, all these years, Crusher Creel still doesn't have a costume. You know, he just got a pair of pants.
There you go. You can draw one of them and give him a new outfit.
Yeah, no, he's better with. He looks cooler with the convict pants.
Yeah.
You know, he's just the bald guy running around shirtless with the pants on.
Yeah. Hey, you did an incredible Doctor Doom. The sketch that you did. That was pretty awesome.
Oh well, thank you. Yeah, those are when you do. That's another cool thing about putting out indie books now is that as Kickstarter. Kickstarter is like, I found out accidentally. I always thought Kickstarter was just about raising money for a project that like somebody, you needed funding because, you know, you couldn't get it bought by a company or you had your own lab or it was, you know, you were into some invention. And then I started to see a lot of creators doing Kickstarter during COVID because it's a way to do this. It's a way to kind of face to face with you know, your supporters and a fan base that's into comics that you lost when all the cons went away. Because you could go to a con and you and I could talk face to face and you could look at the book and go, either I like it or I don't like it. And to me, I know in 2 minutes whether I like it or not. I just look at the art and go, man, it's good, but it's not my thing. And that's what's cool about when I did Kickstarter. So when I started doing those sketches, it was just like, hey man, anybody that is willing to take a chance on an indie book, I'll do them a sketch. I'll do them a kick-ass, you know, 11 by 17 because, you know, I appreciate it during COVID that people are willing to grab an indie title, which a lot of people are. So that, and they started to do what was called Sketch of the Day because I got 2 kids and it's hard to concentrate around here. So when it's 2 a.m. and I'm watching, you know, Law and Order marathons when, you know, the kids, you know, or whatever, you can just sit and, you know, you can hammer out sketches because it's not like, you know, sequential storytelling, which is, you got to concentrate a lot more.
Yeah.
So Doc Doom is just, you know, me bullshitting around.
And so you did some pretty cool zombies also for like the What If show on Marvel on Disney Plus. The zombies you drew, you sketched, those are awesome. The Captain America and stuff like that. Now those fit in that sort of that genre. So
right.
That would be those are nice.
Well, you know, again, it turns into just you know, I'm doing it for myself, you know, and the Sketch of the Day just became, like I said, a stream of consciousness of keeping your chops up. And I'm not, I mean, I always go back to comics. I really, you know, I painted a lot when I was in college, but to me, oil painting of just whatever abstract or landscapes or whatever, it's not a lot of fun. I always go back to drawing a character I like, drawing the Juggernaut or drawing the Destroyer, because these guys were all just lunatics who, you know, I love the villains that made their suit in the basement, you know, or like the Rhino. Yeah, it's just where'd the Rhino come from? He was a guy who got trapped in a suit, you know, that was his origin. The bomb went off in the lab, and now guess what? The suit was stuck to his skin, And I always thought, well, how does he take a shit? Because the suit is stuck on him. But now he's this big angry guy who's stuck with this gray shit stuff. So I'm like, Ramita made him look way too nice.
Right. He had a rough go. He's not squeaky clean gray, right?
Yeah. Or I think a lot of these villains, they're villains because they're wounded people.
Hey, were you a big fan of the Avengers movies? Have you watched any of those movies and stuff?
Yeah. No, my take on all those comic movies is it's like, hey, for the longest time, my biggest problem with the comic book, any of the comic movies, are that I wish it would trickle down to comics. I wish that all the people that went to see Black Panther, even 10% of them, would go and buy a Black Panther comic, would go and buy the medium of comics, and realize that this stuff came from the source material. Right. Explore more of that source material. If less than 1% of the people that went to see the Avengers actually bought a comic, the comic business would be much better. But it just somehow doesn't trickle down.
Yeah, it's like that. There's Marvel created Marvel Unlimited, so they're starting to try to do some things there. But I totally get what you're saying there. It's like a gap. Like in my group, we have wish. Go ahead.
I just wish, because it's like there's a lot of people that don't realize that where these characters came from. They think that they were created for the movies. If you tell them, no, man, Iron Man is a guy from the 60s. Black Panther's from the 60s. I mean, all the Avengers were created, a long time ago. And it's like, I get it. Not everybody's into comics, but I wish that you hear, oh, it made this much. Same with cons. When you hear, 150,000 or 200,000, my take is always, buy some comics.
Right.
Go to Artist Alley. I mean, nowadays, unfortunately, when we get back, and I think we'll be back probably, later this year. I wish when people went to cons, they weren't spending all their money on photo ops with the Walking Dead guys and cosplay. And they went through Artist Alley, and they would, patronize a few artists and buy a few comics.
Yeah. I think one thing probably would help is like if the Hollywood stars, I know they go back and read the comics and to get the sort of their take on some of the characters, but like when they do the cons and just don't promote the movie, like go and sit down with comic book creators and maybe sit on the same panel and talk about comic, I guess.
Cons are, if you're an artist and you're at a con, I mean, not every show is good for you. I mean, I tell guys this all the time. There's shows that are good for just going and kicking the tires and buying some back issues and getting photo ops. But a lot of people go to cons just to kill the day. They've only got so much money. But when you're charging $250 to take a picture with the guy from Walking Dead or the guy from who's Aquaman or whatever, how much money do you think they got left to buy comics after parking and lunch and admission? So, but my take is always, I know a lot of guys that go to Salt Lake City, they go to Denver, they go to Emerald, and they don't make any money. They lose their ass because if you're not an invited guest, you got to pay for all that out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So not every con is worth doing. I mean, just because there's 150,000 people, that doesn't mean you're not going to lose your ass. If you get there and Tootie from Facts of Life is set up next to you, you're not going to make any money because everybody's going to take a picture with Tootie, and everybody's in the I sat next to Cyrus from the Warriors, and everybody's paying Cyrus $85 for his signature because he's also next to Lacey Underall from Caddyshack.
Yeah,
those guys are going to pull away from the indie comic creators, and then they try to put you in small press. But a lot of times, no offense to small press is you get the guy who made it at Kinko's with a stapler. And then you get guys that are really there breaking their ass. And then you got kind of that mix of, guys that are taking it seriously and guys that aren't. So you got to pick and choose because you can go to a con and lose your ass because shows are expensive, man. Emerald Con, you got to go to Seattle. You got to get a hotel room. You got to, and I always tell guys, I go, my first San Diego, I slept in a bathtub, because there was 12 of us in a hotel room. and there was nowhere to sleep. So when people break my balls about the big Alex Ross booth at San Diego, I go, guys, I don't want to hear about it, man. My first San Diego, I was at the DoubleTree. I used a towel for a pillow, and I was sleeping in the tub, and guys kept coming in taking a shit while I was sleeping. So it was not a lot of fun. You know?
See, I think that that's something that a lot of people don't realize today with the magic of cons, where, like, you know, back in the day, back in the early 90s and the late 80s, they were like small in hotel lobbies, right? And you met a few of the artists. Sometimes they would come there. You met the guys selling the back issues, and you could talk to everybody. There wasn't like this crazy crowd blocking you from buying stuff. I remember I used to go to these cons on maybe $200-$300 in my pocket. You know what I did? Spend it all on comic books. That's what I did.
But you know, the funny irony of that is it's going back to that. I mean, there's shows that are going on now. My buddy just did the one down in Florida, and I said, how is it? And he said, very, very few exhibitors, just mostly retailers, guys selling comics, guys selling books, artists in Artist Alley, because no exhibitors, big company wise, are doing shows right now because of COVID. Until COVID goes down, if you're Marvel or you're DC or you're Boom or you're Dark Horse, you're a big exhibitor, you can't send your staff to a show like New York, for example, I think is in 2 weeks, the one at the Javits. Those big companies can't send a staff there because if one of them gets COVID and gets sick, they could sue you. So they're still liable, legally liable. So that's why most of these shows now are back to the type of shows you're talking about, where you got a lot of creators, you got a lot less Hollywood guys, and a lot more retailers that are selling comics, that are selling statues, that are selling that stuff. So it's kind of weird the way it's gone full circle. I mean, the San Diego show that they're doing in November, you know, I spoke with them about, you know, they wanted us to set up, and I can't do it right now because it's just too soon to set up the big, you know, Alex Ross love nest at San Diego. But they sent me the map, and San Diego in November is going to be half the size of what San Diego normally is. And that's the way San Diego was when I slept in the bathtub. It was half the size of the hall, and it was just a lot of small press. Like you said, you could go right up to Byrne, you could go right up to Frank Miller, and it was a lot smaller an event. It wasn't a shitstorm the way some of these shows have turned into.
Okay, so here in Florida, a lot of the cons that I go to, I get press passes, and to MegaCon, SuperCon, Fanboy Expo in Orlando. Fanboy Expo, here's what I was really surprised about. It was a really small this year, very small this year, and nobody noticed the artist. Everybody else was spending money on those guys that yarn the Chucky dolls and yarn the pillows and probably the not legitimized Hello Kitty stuff, you know. And there was Tony Isabella just sitting there by himself, and I went up to him and I'm like, "Whoa, Luke Cage, Black Lightning!"
Yeah.
And I had to get a picture, man. I got those books, got a picture. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because to me, that was amazing. Like, here's all these people, and they don't know who Tony Isabella is.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot of people at cons, they don't know who Jack Kirby is. So Tony Isabella shouldn't feel bad at all. I mean, because anybody in comics knows who Tony is, but you'd be amazed on people that are into comics that say, man, I'm really into comics. And I go, oh, cool. Who's your, you know, give me a couple of your favorite artists. Who did you really like? And then they don't know, like, you know, classic names or artists that are like, you know, pillars in, you know, and you're like, okay, you know, I get it. But some of that is getting old, and some of that is just, you know, the comic industry doesn't really want superstars anymore. They want the characters to be the focus. They learned from the Image years that they don't want the artist to be bigger than the title. You know, Marvel owns Cap, but they don't own the artist. So they want you to focus on the license, you know, on the characters.
Yeah. I mean, that is very true, because I do remember at the Philadelphia Comic-Con when Image first presented themselves as a group, and there was Todd McFarlane, there was Jim Lee, all the original Mark Silvestri was there, and they were like a superpower team. But I mean, it was still back in the days where you go up and talk to them. But I mean, everybody knew them by name
Right.
compared to all the other stuff. You know,
Not
people coming
anymore.
up. You know,
Not anymore. They don't
Yeah.
want that. They learn the, they want, they're focused on the books. They're focused on what they, they own, you know, and it just, and that's why as an artist, you got to go out and you got to do it yourself. You got to bang the drum. You got to do your social media. You've got to go to shows. You've got to keep, the most important thing I think is to stay current, is to put work out. There's nothing worse than really, really talented guys that you're like, man, he hasn't done anything in 10 years. He hasn't done anything in 5 years. They're living off of projects they did years ago. And that's cool, but that only lasts so long. You're not doing anything to perpetuate a new audience. You're kind of living off the past, and that only lasts so long before people go, okay, hey, remember when you did, and it's a book from 20 years ago. You're like, what?
Yeah, that kind of, I mean, in a way that kind of happened with what you're saying is they want you to remember the IPs and not the artists. That happened with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You associate them now with Nickelodeon instead of Eastman and Laird, which were the creators. And I still remember because I had the graphic novel, which was violent and not like the cartoon imagery that we see today. But I wanted to tell you that, MegaCon is coming up in May. So I don't know, but if you came to MegaCon, I could meet you, which would be awesome. And
I'm thinking about, I mean, we were ready to go. I was going to do San Diego in November, but it's A, too soon, but B, it's Thanksgiving weekend. So I just think it's I think it's just a bad time to be doing a show. And I don't want to go to O'Hare, and travel on the busiest travel day of the year to go to San Diego. And I love San Diego. It's my favorite show, and the people there are fantastic. But the same with New York. New York is in 2 weeks, and I won't lie, man. That show is, it kicks your ass, man. That show is crowded. It is 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. It is a lot of people, and it's crowded, but it's New York. So that's why you got to do New York, because it's where the publishing business is. A, B, you want to do New York. If you're in the comic business, it's New York. But I think it's too soon to go into Javits, with 90,000 people, because it's not just about COVID, it's about business. I just don't know, most of the big exhibitors and big publishers are not going to be there.
Right.
And I wish them well. I think the show will do fantastic. I think New York will come out for it because people there love comics. But I just think it's sometimes you got to know when to punt. And I'm going to wait until 22 before I start doing shows again.
One thing I want to touch on is that what you said, and you're absolutely correct on this, Sal. So you said that cosplay is becoming like this huge thing, and it's becoming more of a concentration at Comic Cons essentially than comic books themselves, which is absolutely correct. I mean, some of these cosplayers go insane with their designs and spend thousands of dollars on their designs. So I noticed something that happened at MegaCon that surprised me a little bit. So at MegaCon, like you said, they have the artist alley, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes some of the best artists in artist alley. And then to the left of that, usually there's a row with the independent publishers. But I noticed this year, there are some comic book artists that are well known, like in underground circles, that do like zombie comics on the borderline of like not safe for work kind of stuff. And they put their booths right next to the cosplayers. And I noticed when they did that, they had lines down the aisle, because you'd see all these guys go all to the cosplay girls. And all of a sudden they hit this one artist that does the work that they kind of like. And man, they were just stacking up. And I think that they were playing business smarts there. They knew that cosplay row was that number one row.
Yeah. I think it's to me, I'm biased. I want guys to go there and buy comics. Is there anything wrong with pretty girls in cosplay? Oh, hell no. I think it's fine. I think that is it same with celebrities. If they're going to be there to autograph, it's always been that way. It's always going to be like that. I just wish more people, when I hear them brag about, hey, we got 150,000 people here, I just like to see guys buying comics. I always ask, you buy any comics? Tell them to buy some comics when they brag or they post. I just always write on there, why don't you try buying some comics? You know, a comic. Go through Artist Alley. Go look at a guy's work. You know, girls with great asses, whatever. I live in the real world. That's what's going to happen. I also am not a fan of the guys that are there selling stuff that's just basically dupes and swiped from other artists. You're starting to see a lot of that at cons where they don't police that. Where you got a guy with a bunch of posters that are just shitty pulled off the internet from 20 different artists. He prints them at Kinko's and he's selling them for $20 a piece. That's not cool. That's like, to me, that's plagiarism. That goes on a lot. And that's the cons fault. The cons should police more of that to say, hey, you got to have a license to do that stuff. You should not be able to peddle, Adam Hughes's images if you're not Adam Hughes. I get it. If you got a DC license or a Marvel license, that's the world we live in, and it's going to go on. But I'm starting to see guys, huge towers in Artist Alley of all plagiarized images, all shit they pulled off the internet.
Yep.
I see it with Alex all the time. And I can't police that. I can't walk around and say, hey, you got to take that down or whatever. I mean, who's got the time for that? But, that's the cons responsibility. Right. But, that's why you got to learn to be picky or speak up. Emerald Con, you could do that. Some cons, you can't say shit. They're just going to ignore you. Some cons, you could say, hey, man, can you do me a favor? This guy over here, can you talk to this or whatever? There's also rules to cosplay. If your ass is hanging out too much, they'll shut you down because there's people there with kids.
Right.
And I've been to shows where there's girls with pasties on, or they paint their body. They want to be Mystique and blah, blah, blah. You can't have a naked, there's anything wrong with naked women, but you can't have a naked broad walking around and you're there with your kids. There's, you got to kind of, so now they've literally told them you got to stay outside. If you've got an adult oriented costume, cosplay's got to meet out front or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I think it only becomes an issue when I hear artists complain. Hey, I went to this show and I lost my ass. And it's like, well, then you shouldn't go to it. There's certain shows I could tell you're going to lose your ass. When I look at the list of what's there, if it's 2/3 cosplay and celebrities, you're going to lose your ass. You're not going to make it. You can't compete with Jason Momoa or whatever, or Tootie. If you're there selling a Tommy gun. They're always going to go for the celebrity, or the girl with her ass hanging out. That's just the way it is.
Are you, hold on. I was going to ask him, are you going to get into NFTs and do a NFT design?
NFT is a funny thing, man. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I get it. Sometimes you got to just go with the flow because that's the way the world's headed. They're going to do it without you, with or without you. They're going to do it. I've talked to Marvel about it. I've talked to Warner Brothers about it. They're still trying to shake out all the legalities of it. But the short answer to your question is no. I think if it's around 5 years from now and everybody's doing it and clamoring for it, then we may entertain it, but you got to get a license to do it. I'm not going to be like the Wild West and just go out there and start releasing NFTs. I kind of think it's stupid, but then again, everything we thought was stupid, when it first came out.
Turns into a 100 billion industry, right?
I thought the internet was stupid when it first came out. I thought PayPal was stupid. I thought Amazon selling books online was stupid, so.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to listen and wait. So I'm waiting and I'm listening.
Yeah. An opportunity strikes, I
don't know. We've gotten a lot of these mom and pop companies or different companies that have come to us to ask about NFTs. And my question to them is always, hey, do you got a license? Because we don't own Superman. And they're like, yeah, but we got these great Superman images Alex did, and it would make great NFTs. I go, yeah, but we don't own Superman. So I can't give you permission to use Superman I can give you permission to use the image, but if it's Superman, you don't own the image, they're gonna come calling me and go, hey, wait a minute, you told these guys you could use the image, you don't own it, and then we get sued.
Yeah.
So my take on that is I'm like, unless it's creator owned, you got to have a license to use those images, you know, because those companies want to get paid.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very protective of the IPs that they own. As a matter of fact,
it's fun and games until money's involved. Money changes it all.
It does. There was a Captain America statue, and now this is the funny thing. It was an actual statue, like a 3D statue, right? It rotated. You got to see the angles. It was sold as an NFT, and it pulled in a decent amount of money. I don't remember how much, but Marvel came back and they were like, wait a minute, who is selling our stuff? We didn't give permission for our stuff to be sold. And I think it was just, if I remember correctly, I think it was some guy who just took a 3D picture of an actual Captain America statue and then rotated it around. Yeah.
It's like the Wild West. There's going to be a lot of that, but when you work in the business, you know, like Alex does, and, you know, I'm his business manager. If anything shows up that Alex Ross said it was okay to do, you can't do it, because Marvel will call me up and say, Sal, what the hell's going on here? You know, and then you got to play by the rules or you're not going to work for them anymore. You know, they might not come and sue you, but they might not hire you. They'll be pissed off at you.
They're gonna be very pissed. Right.
So I don't have to cut you off. I just don't necessarily treat you as well. And we got a good relationship with them. And if you don't play, I know a lot of artists that don't play by the rules. And then they want to know why they're not getting hired regularly. And it's like, well, because you don't play by the rules. If you want to act like you're in high school and do that Wild West shit, it's only going to get you so far.
Yeah.
You can't be penny wise and dollar stupid. You got to think, I'm not doing comics now. I'm supposed to be doing comics for the next, 30 years. And it's all about relationships. It's 99% of all this stuff is about relationships. And if you piss everybody off to make a few dollars.
Yeah, I think that this is the way that everything's going with Marvel and DC. Everything's becoming more corporately controlled, more DMCA. They really want to hold on to those IP rights, especially seeing how much revenue now that the digital stuff brings in, the movies bring in, the contracts they have with channels like Disney Plus, HBO Max. I mean, there's just so much money in the corporate world that these IPs are pulling in. They don't want people to do anything offensive or stupid with their IPs that could affect the brand. They have to protect their brand. Yeah.
You got to play by the rules. I mean, that's why I tell guys, I go, do your own stuff. Do your own stuff for a ton of reasons. Is that, you at the end of the day, and I always tell Alex and Bill this all the time. I said, at the end of the day, when we've got, our booth set up and we've got all these images and all this framed art and all this stuff, I'm like, look around, man. We don't own one of these characters. We don't own any of this. But when you do your own, at the end of the day, when you die, none of that belongs to you. Jack Kirby, I mean, he didn't live to see the money that they're making off of his creations. He created hundreds and hundreds of characters. And at the end of the, he if they screw over Kirby, they'll screw you over. So that's why you have to, at some point, set up your own tent and say, hey, I want to make my own stuff. I want to make my own characters. And then you understand how it works, because now you got to protect your own stuff, because the minute it makes money, they're going to try to steal it from you. And so, when you want to work for a company, you understand, okay, I don't own these characters, and these characters are going to be around long. They're going to be making Spider-Man stuff when we're dead. 100 years from now, Superman will be around and we won't, So the real value of these characters for these companies are the IPs. So that's why I say create your own, man. I mean, you got to work and you work on other people's stuff, but there's nothing wrong with creating your own stuff.
Awesome. Well, Sal, this has been great, man. This has been wonderful to
All right, guys.
spend
Yeah,
some time for you.
I had a good time.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Before we close out, Carlo, where can we find you?
I'm all over, man. I'm Instagram, Sal Abbinanti or Mercury Comics, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. Or Alex Ross Art, that's me. Bill Sienkiewicz Art, that's me. But Sal Abbinanti, on any of those things is that goes directly to me. And the same with Instagram. I post art every day, and what I'm working on now. I posted some stuff today, and so anybody wants to hit me up about anything, that's where I'm at. But thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate it. I mean,
awesome. Mercury Comics.
Absolutely.
Mercury Comics.
I never take it for granted that anybody asks me to be on their shows, or because at cons everybody goes, "Hey, are you Alex Ross?" And I always have to say it 100 times a day. No, I'm not Alex Ross. I'm your biggest. I always love it when they go, "I'm your biggest fan," and I go, "Yeah, but you don't know what I look like." Alex Ross, I'm your biggest fan. I'm like, yeah, well, kind of Google what he looks like, and he doesn't look like.
There you go. Watch some of the videos, right?
Yeah. Awesome. I'm like, I always 100 times a day I get asked, "Are you Alex Ross?" And it's like, no, and it's like, well, why are you here? I don't want to talk to you. Okay. No.
I want to thank you for coming on, and I had a lot of fun talking to you about the pizza and the pineapples, and
anything you guys need, shoot me an email.
Awesome.
All right. So for everybody who's watching and listening later, this was Sal Abbinanti, and he agrees. No pineapple on pizza. He agrees. And awesome. I just want to, I hope you had a good time listening to the show. And thank you, Sal, for coming on. You're amazing to talk to, man. I feel like I could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours, man.
Wow. I don't know about all that. You might get sick of me after a while. Trust me. Ask my wife. She'll tell you, man, shut up.
Awesome. Well, to everybody out there, thank you for listening, and talk to you later.
All right.